My mom taught me to sell at a spaza shop. She ran a hair salon. I pretty much learned entrepreneurship from my mom's.
Umntu ngumntu ngabantu. That on your own, you can't really do it. You need the support of those around you.
You will have a network of people, a network of communities, and a society that will make sure that you count.
Good evening and welcome to another episode of Saita Straight Talk. Saita Straight Talk is powered by Saita, the South African Informal Traders Alliance, the voice of the informal sector here in South Africa. And every Tuesday and Thursday evenings, it is my privilege to host topics with specialist panelists for the informal sector and discuss pertinent issues that affects our daily lives. This evening, we're going to talk about what has been bothering all of us for the last 18 months at least. It's called Covid-19, and with Covid-19 came the vaccine. And tonight we're going to talk about the vaccine, what it means, should we take it, should we not take it, what is the truth and what is not the truth. And like I said, we want to bring you the truth, and that is why we have specialists with us. I want to greet this evening Paul. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Thanks for having me, Louise.
Please, Paul, just elaborate who you are.
All right. I'm Paul Bester, the National Director for Membership Saita South Africa.
Thank you, Paul. We also have on board Dr. Wasila Jasat. Good evening, Wasila, and welcome to Saita Straight Talk.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
Wasila, give us a little bit of an introduction on who you are and what you keep yourself busy with and why you are chatting to us this evening.
All right. So I don't usually like my CV to be read out to people. It embarrasses me. But for today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself because I would like you to understand where I'm coming from and what what my background is, because I think the information you get on anything, but particularly on COVID-19, we need to interrogate who our sources of information are. So I hope that I have some experience and expertise to share with you. So I'm a medical doctor. I studied at Wits University. I finished in the year 2000. I then specialized in public health medicine, also at Wits. And I enrolled for a PhD at UWC, and I'm trying to understand the gap between health policy and how it's implemented, and I hope to graduate next year. And for the past year and a half, I've been working at the National Institute for Communicable Diseases. So that's like South Africa's equivalent of, you hear of the CDC. So it's our infectious disease agency in South Africa. And what I do at the NICD is I work on COVID-19 statistics. So the data you see that's reported by the minister or in the media of the number of cases, the number of hospitalizations, the number of deaths every day, my team and I help to put those together. And I've also been helping to work on a long COVID study where we're following people up to see how many people have persistent symptoms after COVID-19. And I've been working on some vaccine effectiveness studies. So that's been my experience. I've been living and breathing COVID-19 for the past year and a half. I haven't had a day off for a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's me.
Wow, Wasila, you don't have anything to be embarrassed about. That's quite a CV. If I were you, I'd be walking with my arms out like that. But thank you again for joining. I'm fully vaccinated, and my family is too, my immediate family. But within the broader family, there are some of our family members that are resisting it blatantly. And then there are others that are saying, oh, you know what, let's wait and see. I'm going to wait and see. Because nobody in our family, immediate family, has really been affected by COVID-19. So I suppose there's that kind of comfort. But on a personal level, I have lost very, very dear friends In one instance, it was a husband and a wife who both died 3 days after each other from COVID-19. So is this a true story? Is this because, in the media you get so many different opinions, and I don't often blame people when they feel slightly confused. So paint the picture for us, please.
So I agree with you. I try not to judge people and their points of view because everyone's coming from a different perspective. Not everyone is a hardline anti-vaxxer and will never use a vaccine or distrust governments and vaccine companies. Some people are just a little bit confused, have heard some things from friends in the media or social media, and just are a little bit hesitant and a little bit unsure. And so that's really why I have made it a little bit of a personal crusade to share information. It's not a crusade to vaccinate people. My crusade is to share good information so that we can counter some of the misinformation, some of the myths, some of the inaccuracies that are out there. So I actually have a slideshow prepared where I try to answer some of the questions people may have. So if you indulge me, I'd like to share that with the audience, and then maybe after that we can get into more specific questions and answers. Would that be okay?
I think she's on mute, but I think she says, proceed, doctor.
I did indeed. Proceed, doctor, please.
Okay, let me share then.
Thank you, spokesperson Paul.
Yes, so I've titled my presentation, Let's Talk COVID-19 Vaccines. And really, I've tried to address it in terms of questions that you might have, and I'll try and present answers. And what I do want to say is that all the information I'm sharing comes from reputable sources, from published studies, from actual scientific organizations. And so none of this is really just, passing information. So what I want to talk a little bit about is how do vaccines in general work. I'll tell you a little bit about the COVID-19 vaccines and how they work. How was the vaccine developed? Are they safe? Do they work? What are some of the future scenarios for COVID-19? What's our future going to look like in South Africa and in the world? And then maybe some questions and answers to address some common myths. And then importantly, at the end, I'll answer some questions about should you take the COVID-19 vaccine. So how do vaccines work? Now, your body normally has encountered some viruses and bacteria and fungus in your lifetime. And when your body encounters them, it creates antibodies, which is your body's immune response against those pathogens. So that when your body sees them again, it says, oh, I know that's measles. It's not good. I've got antibodies. Let me go and kill that measles. So that works for things that you've encountered before. But with coronavirus, the SARS-CoV-2 was a new virus that our bodies have not encountered before. So we had no antibodies for it. So when the pandemic first started, if you did get it, okay, many people had mild disease, but 15% of people had severe disease and may need to be hospitalized. And about 2% of all people who got infected died. And so especially those who are older, those with medical conditions, they developed quite severe complications for COVID-19. So for any infectious disease, the ideal is that we shouldn't have to suffer getting the disease and all its complications before we develop some immunity. If we can develop a vaccine, it's ideal because then your body, using the vaccine, develops antibodies and then protects your cell. So that's what a vaccine is. It injects something in your cells to teach your cells how to create antibodies. And then those antibodies, when you do encounter COVID-19, and so if you are exposed to someone with the virus, your body will already immediately recognize it and you'll mount an antibody response. And you will probably not get it, or if you do get it, it will be very mild. Now, you may ask, what are the ingredients in a vaccine? Because you've heard that there are fetal cells and all kinds of things. Now, all that's in the vaccine is the antigen, which is a part of the virus. So the SARS-CoV-2, the coronavirus, we take a part of it, we put that in the vaccine, and then there are other things, preservatives, stabilizers, diluents. These are just normal salts, sugars, chemicals that you find in many medicines and vaccines, and those are there to stabilize the vaccine. Now, there's 3 different types of vaccines. The one, you use the whole virus, although they're inactivated, so it's not actually a living virus. Another type of vaccine, they use a part of the vaccine that's going to help to trigger your immune system. And a third type is they use genetic material. So let me tell you about COVID-19 vaccines. So the first type of vaccine you may have heard about is the mRNA vaccine, and the examples of those are Pfizer and Moderna. So how these vaccines work, right? Now, on the COVID virus, there's a particular protein called the spike protein, and that helps the virus to enter our cells, right? So the spike protein is quite important. Now, mRNA is an amazing technology. It's a molecule that's literally like a messenger. It can target, you can send this message to a certain cell and tell it to make a certain product. And so what the mRNA does, it says, look here, this is a spike protein. Go into this cell and create antibodies against the spike protein, okay? The second one is a vector vaccine. And so examples of those are AstraZeneca and J&J, the Johnson & Johnson. So what that vaccine does, it takes that spike protein, it's a harmless little part of the vaccine, so it's not really active, right? And then it puts it in a different virus. So now not the coronavirus, it puts it in a different virus. So for J&J, it's an adenovirus, which causes a common cold. Now that virus just carries the spike protein into your cells, and then it tells your cells, make these antibodies. And the third type is a protein subunit vaccine, and Novavax is an example. So that one directly takes that spike protein, it purifies it, it amplifies it, it puts it in a vaccine, and then that enters your cells. Now, all these three types of vaccines, the mRNA, the viral vector, and the protein subunit, now they enter your cell, and then that spike protein, it attaches to your cell, and it teaches your body that this is not a normal thing. We need to create antibodies. It teaches your body how to make the antibodies. Your body makes the antibody, and it neutralizes that spike protein. So now your body mounts this immune response, and it develops memory. So the next time when you are with someone who has COVID and you exposed to it and the virus gets into your body says, oh, we already have antibodies for that one. And it sends those antibodies and it prevents it from replicating and creating more virus in your body. So the two vaccines that are commonly being used in South Africa is the J&J, which is a 1-dose viral vector vaccine, and the Pfizer, which is a 2-dose mRNA vaccine, and it's given 6 weeks apart. How are the vaccines developed? Now, normally when we develop vaccines, we do many different phases of studies. We do preclinical studies where we test the vaccine in animals to see if it works, to see if it's safe. Then when we see it works well, we do a phase 1 clinical trial where we take a small group of very healthy adults who volunteer to receive the vaccine, and we test it for safety. If it works well, we do a phase 2 clinical trial. Now we give the vaccine to more people of different ages, different health, so we can see that in the people who eventually are going to get the vaccine, what is the response going to be. Then we do a phase 3 clinical trial where we give the vaccine to thousands of people, and again we test and we follow them up for a few months to see if it works and if it's safe, if they develop any side effects. And then after we start using the vaccine, we continue to do surveillance to look for adverse events and side effects and to see how well it works. Now, how with the COVID-19?
Sorry, Doctor.
Sure.
I just want to interject here because I've got two questions that I want to ask on the
Sure.
previous slides. Because in South Africa, not all the vaccines that you mentioned were used, because we've only got Pfizer and J&J.
That's right.
Right? So why were the others not used? Because I remember there was a batch that landed here. I think it was AstraZeneca that was sent back. So help us to understand why that batch wasn't used in South Africa.
Sure, that's a good question. So when we started our vaccine rollout a few months after some of the other countries, and then part of that is just as global inequity with vaccines. Rich countries have bought like more than what they need, and the poor countries have gotten vaccine very late and not enough vaccine. So when we were starting in February, we had already made arrangements to procure AstraZeneca. But remember, in December, January, February, we had the second wave of COVID-19. And a new variant, which was a beta variant, was circulating in South Africa. So when that vaccine arrived and we tested it, we found that it didn't work as well against the beta variant. And so we realized that why use a vaccine that's going to be less efficacious, especially because we were starting with healthcare workers and with over 60s. We needed to use the vaccine that has the best performance against even variants. And so that's why it was decided not to use the AstraZeneca, because we found that J&J and Pfizer worked very well even against variants.
Okay, thanks for that. That's a great explanation. But now I want to also jump to the clinical studies and the trials. So was the trial period long enough for people to actually say that the vaccine is safe?
So let me take you through that, right? In this picture, you'll see on the top that traditional vaccine development timeline is like sometimes 10 years. And all those phases I told you about just now, they do it, one after the other in sequence. So first they do preclinical, then they do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Then they start developing the infrastructure for manufacturing the vaccine. Then there's a long process getting approval, and then they start using the vaccine. So yes, all the other vaccines we normally use take many years to develop. Now, what we did with COVID-19 is we couldn't wait 10 years. People were dying. Millions of people around the world have already died. In South Africa, it's estimated that 250,000 people have died of COVID-19, even though the official number reported is about 90,000. But actually, lots of people don't test and are not diagnosed, and they die at home. So the MRC thinks that it's closer to 250,000 people who have died. So we can't just wait 10 years. It would be unethical to have a vaccine and to wait to use it because we want to go through all the trials. And in the meantime, millions of people are dying. And so what we did is, because of the urgency of the pandemic and people were dying, and also because we were not starting from scratch, there was some existing knowledge already because people have been working on these vaccines for years. Remember, there was a SARS-CoV-1 pandemic, an outbreak in early 2000. So we already knew that this virus can cause a pandemic of global proportions. So they've been working on this vaccine for a while. They used new technology that already exists. And for the first time, huge amounts of funding from governments, from multinational corporations were pumped into this. And also for the first time, normally it's very competitive. Each company, pharmaceutical company, works in their own. This time, scientists, industry, multinationals all work collaboratively across the globe. So the crucial difference is, instead of doing it sequentially, we did all those different phases of vaccine development in parallel. So if you can see at the bottom, the accelerated timeline for COVID-19, we did the preclinical, we started the phase 1, we started the phase 2, while it was going on, we started the phase 3. And from the beginning, we already started building the manufacturing capacity, the factories and stuff, because we didn't wait to see, once we have a vaccine that works, now let's start building the factory. We already started all of that so that once we had a viable vaccine, we'd very quickly be able to manufacture and approve it. So I think that what should be celebrated actually is that, faced with a global pandemic, the world got together, did studies in many different countries, and got a vaccine within a year that was already being used. And so that's how we got the vaccine developed so quickly. So you may ask, did we compromise on safety in developing the vaccine so quickly? Yes. And I can assure you that all the usual safety and efficacy mechanisms remained in place. So during those studies, to do any vaccine study, you need to get certain approvals. You have boards that monitor you. You then, to get approval, each country has like a SAHPRA or a Food and Drug Administration in the US, and it has to go through strict criteria to get approved there. To publish these studies also needs peer review. And so, it goes through a huge process for it to be approved. And just to say, the FDA in America advises that you must have at least 3,000 people to participate in a vaccine study to assess its safety. The studies for COVID-19 vaccine have used 30 to 50,000 participants, including people from South Africa. And so remember, the first vaccine studies started in March, April last year. So we tested it in tens of thousands of people. And really, to follow any vaccine study, you need to follow up people for about 2, 3, 4, 5 months. And then that's when you would see if it works, and you would see if there's any serious side effects. And so we had enough time. By November, December, we started getting vaccines approved, and they started being used in other countries. And so we now have people who have been receiving vaccines for almost a year around the world. So we've got decent amount of information about, how vaccine works in people. So the next question you may have is, are the COVID-19 vaccines safe? So some of the possible side effects you could have from the vaccine are headaches, muscle pain, chills, fever, and tiredness. You could have redness and pain at the injection site or a sore arm, but these generally last just 1 or 2 days. If you have a fever and it lasts longer and you develop a cough or sore throat, that's not the vaccine. You may actually have COVID-19 because remember, COVID-19 is still circulating. And so if you have symptoms that last much longer, it could be that you have COVID-19 or some other infection, and so you should actually isolate and have a test. So those are the mild. Yeah.
Sorry, doctor. So what you are actually saying, now that I've listened to you explaining the ingredients and how the vaccine works, with what I see here on the side effects, there should then there's nothing in the vaccine that can cause you to die.
Yeah, I'm going to come to that because there are some more serious adverse events. So these side effects are actually good. They're telling you that your body is mounting that immune response, right? If you have a bit of fever and chills, it means your body is doing what it was supposed to do. It saw that spike protein, it created antibodies. And like, normally when you have flu or whatever, you have these symptoms because your body is mounting an immune response. So these side effects are just normal things. They last a few days. Some people had no side effects. Some people have mild side effects. Some people have side effects with the first dose and not the second dose. But these are normal things and they shouldn't last more than a couple of days. But there are a few more serious events that could happen, side effects or adverse events with vaccines. Now, I must say that if you open a box of antibiotics or even Panado, and if you read that long insert inside, every medicine has some side effects, some contraindications, some severe adverse events. That's just the nature of medication. It can cause some adverse events that we don't want to happen, but that's just the nature of it. And so no different with any other vaccine or with the COVID-19 vaccine. So a few people can get an allergic reaction, but this has been very, very rare. So if you're allergic to other things like penicillin or whatever, that doesn't mean you shouldn't take the COVID vaccine. Only people who are allergic to some product in this particular vaccine are at risk. And so it's only happened, for instance, in the data from the US, 2 to 5 people per million people who were vaccinated had an allergic reaction. And then with the Pfizer, there is a warning that a few people have developed heart inflammation. It's 854 people out of 362 million doses that were given. So that's not a big number. And actually, most were very mild. Also, there's a side effect of Bell's palsy. That's a temporary paralysis of your one side of your face. And again, this happened very rarely, and it was quite mild. With J&J, one of the warnings is with Guillain-Barré syndrome. This is usually happens after viruses, even after flu or other viruses. You develop this weakness from your nerves, and it starts from your legs and it goes up. Now, I must say that these things are all much more common with COVID-19 than they are with the vaccine. Even the next one I wanted to mention, blood clots. 46 people got it in 14.5 million doses that were given. You have a much higher chance of getting clots if you have COVID-19 than getting clots if you had taken the vaccine. So yes, there are some of these rare adverse events that could happen with the COVID-19 vaccine, but that could happen with any medicines. They're very rare. Mostly they're mild, but that's not to discount completely and say it's completely safe. I would be lying if I say to you that nothing can happen to you. With everything in life, there are pros and cons, and there's things to balance between.
Okay, thank you.
So I wanted to just for some perspective, right? By last week, a total of 6.4 billion doses of COVID vaccine have been given across the world. So 35% of the whole human population are fully vaccinated. In South Africa, we're lagging behind a little bit. 18.3 million doses have been given, and 16% of South Africans are fully vaccinated. So for those people who say, no, I'm going to wait, we don't have enough experience yet with it, 6.4 billion doses have been given already. So I think that there's a fair amount of experience with the vaccine, and people have been given the vaccine for quite a few months already. So here's some data for you, and this is actual data from national kind of databases. So if you look at South Africa, England, and America, right? So for every 1 million people who get COVID-19, how many die? In South Africa, 29,000 people died. In England, 22,000, and in America, 18,000. For every 1 million people who were vaccinated, how many deaths were reported for investigation? In South Africa, at that time, 5. In England, 18, and in America, 18. And when they investigated those deaths, how many of the deaths were confirmed to be caused by the vaccine? And it's 0. And SAPRA here in South Africa have reported that no deaths that have occurred after vaccine were linked to the jab. And so people can still die of other things. People can still contract COVID-19 after they've gotten the vaccine, and they could die from there. But directly related to the vaccine, thus far in South Africa, there's been no deaths that have been caused by the vaccine. So one thing to remember, like I said before, is if you get COVID-19, 15% of people have severe disease, 2% of people die, people get kidney failure, people get lung disease, people get clots and strokes, and then 1 in 10 people who recover go on to have long COVID. And long COVID, you can have for months and months, brain fog, fatigue, shortness of breath. And so there's many risks with COVID-19 disease. Now with the vaccine, there's extremely small risk of very rare adverse events. So I think you have to weigh up, the risks with getting COVID and the risks of taking the vaccine. So do the vaccines work? Now, when they do the study, and please ignore, there's a lot of data here, but I'm going to try and explain it to you, right? When they do a vaccine trial, they give some of the volunteers a vaccine and some of the volunteers the placebo. So there's no vaccine and they don't know what they got. Then they follow them up for a few months and they see how many people got COVID, how many people hospitalized, how many people died. And then based on that, they calculate the vaccine efficacy. You may have heard this word. So with the Pfizer vaccine, for instance, it's 95% effective against getting COVID, and it's 100% effective against severe COVID. That means nobody who got the Pfizer vaccine in the studies actually got severe disease and died. With J&J, the efficacy is a bit less, but what this data is clearly showing you that people who get the vaccine do better than people who don't get the vaccine in the studies. Now, remember also that no vaccines are 100% effective. Look on the right, the flu vaccine is 44% effective. That's why we take the vaccine every year, because it doesn't last very long and it doesn't always protect you against getting flu. Some people still get flu. And that's fine, because what we want the vaccine to do is protect you against dying. We don't mind if it doesn't protect you completely against COVID-19, because if you do get COVID-19 after vaccine, it's usually quite mild. So here's some data, right? So on the left is data from America for 102,000 unvaccinated people on the left. 1,600 people were hospitalized, that's the red blocks, and 417 people died, that's a yellow block. Now on the right, look at 102,000 vaccinated people. Only 100 people got breakthrough infection and only 1 person died. So here you can clearly see from data from America the difference between unvaccinated and vaccinated people. In Israel, in December, January, they started vaccinating people over 60. So once they had been fully vaccinated by January, you can see in the red graph that people under 60 were still being diagnosed positive. So there were still cases and there were still hospital admissions. But people over 60, cases and admissions went down because they were protected by the vaccine. This was England. On the left in red is the second wave. On the right in gray is the third wave. Now, in this second wave, they had a variant, alpha variant. It was very transmissible. It caused a lot of cases and it caused a lot of deaths. You can see those deaths on the right-hand side, right? In the third wave, they were hit by the Delta variant. The Delta variant is highly transmissible and it is more severe. So they were hit with a lot of cases with the Delta variant, but very few deaths. And so between the second and third wave, they started their vaccine program, and you can see the difference. While there were many deaths in the second wave, there were very few deaths in the third wave, and that's why we have a vaccination program. So what about South Africa? We started the vaccine program in February for healthcare workers, and then in May for over 60s, and then we started broadening it to other age groups. So to date, about 18 million people doses have been given, and 31% of South Africans have received a dose. Now, in the Sisonke program, they gave 400,000 healthcare workers a vaccine dose. Out of those 400,000, 12,000 people actually got COVID-19 even after the vaccine. Most of them were mild, 95%, 2.7% were moderate, and then 0.5% were severe or died. So there were 53 people who died. They investigated them and they found that none of those deaths were related to the vaccine. So those were people who got COVID-19 despite the vaccine, and they died because of COVID-19. And so the vaccine was shown in the study to be protective against getting COVID, against being hospitalized, and against dying. Discovery also looked at the data of their members who were vaccinated and unvaccinated. So you'll see in the graph, these are people who developed COVID, right? And in blue, you'll see the vaccinated. In red, you'll see the unvaccinated. So clearly, their vaccinated members had much lower chance of getting COVID-19 than the unvaccinated. And on the right, you'll even see there were many more infections, more hospital admissions, and more deaths in unvaccinated compared to vaccinated. So it's not just data from other countries. Even in South Africa, our data is showing vaccine prevents against hospitalization and death. I'll just show you, Groote Schuur published this in September. On that particular day, out of 156 people hospitalized in the hospital that day, only 3 were vaccinated, the rest were all unvaccinated. Of the 66 people in high care or ICU, none were vaccinated, they were all unvaccinated. Of the 32 people on ventilators, all were unvaccinated. So this is an experience our doctors from the hospitals are telling us. Since the vaccine program started, the hospitals have been full of unvaccinated people. So what's the future of COVID-19 in South Africa? Now, earlier on, we used to talk about herd immunity. This is when everyone has some immunity and then the virus can't circulate anymore. Now, this is not going to be possible in South Africa or anywhere for that matter, because the vaccine doesn't protect 100%. A few people will still get disease. And although you may get it, it may not be severe. You may not transmit it to other people as much, but also your protection after the vaccine or after getting disease itself, it wanes. So it doesn't last very long. And over a few months, your protection starts to wane. The other problem is we keep getting new variants, and a virus wants to survive. So it gets clever and it mutates so that it becomes more easy to be transmitted and it creates more severe disease. And so we keep having these new variants, and some of these variants escape the vaccine. Also, there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy. So in South Africa, if only 30% of people have been vaccinated, we're not going to get to a point like some of the countries, Denmark and Finland and others, who have 70, 80% vaccine coverage already. They are opening up and going back to normal. They're not wearing masks. They have big gatherings, sporting events. We can't do that because we've got such a low coverage of vaccine. As time goes on, people get tired, and we're going to relax restrictions. We're going to start mixing, and the virus is going to continue to spread. And so remember that the goal of vaccination for us is not to get herd immunity. We want to just prevent people from getting severe disease so that we don't fill up the hospitals and the ICU beds. Because when we have that wave and the beds are full, the doctors can't cope. There's not enough oxygen, not enough ICU beds, and more people die during that surge. So we want to have smaller waves. So the best way to do that is to have more people get vaccines. So even if they get COVID, they get very mild disease. They don't get so sick and need to be in hospital. And also, if you get vaccine, you're less likely for the virus to circulate amongst us. Think about it in a home. If you have 6 people living in a home and 4 people are already vaccinated, the chance of COVID getting into the home and moving between people is much less if some of the people are already vaccinated. So I think I already spoke about this. We will have new variants, and vaccines don't work 100% against the variant because the variant is trying to be clever and trying to escape the vaccine, right? But generally, so far, the Pfizer and J&J are working quite well against our Delta variant. So unless we have a new variant that really doesn't protect you, the vaccine doesn't protect you, then I think we'll have a big problem. So what are the possible scenarios of the future, right? Number one, all people could get natural infection. Those who survive are protected, and then next time they get COVID again, it will be milder. And then SARS-CoV-2 becomes like flu. It just circulates all the time, like other coronaviruses, like flu, and it just becomes something we get used to. Now, we don't think this is a likely scenario because of these variants and because our protection doesn't last very long. So maybe what's more likely is scenario 2 or 3. So scenario 2, immune protection wanes. So you got COVID, you got some immune response, but it doesn't last many months. Or you got the vaccine and your protection doesn't last more than 6-8 months. And then we get new variants. And so because you don't have long protection and because of new variants, we need to take 5-year booster shots of the COVID vaccine. Then there's scenario 3, where our immune protection is very short and we get very severe variants that constantly emerge. And in that case, we may need annual boosters. So I don't know at the moment which way we're going to go. I think we need more data. We need to see what happens to the virus across the world. We need to see if new variants continue to occur. And we need to see if more people, if we get higher coverage of the vaccine, then we have more chance of having less circulation of the virus. I don't know, before I go on to some of the common myths, did you have anything else, based on that you wanted to ask me, Louise?
No. I was going to ask you about the booster shots when you spoke about the efficacy, sort of reducing after time, but now you're saying every 5 years. Do you think, depending on how aggressive and should the virus mutate, worst case, that 5 years might have to become a shorter period for people that are vaccinated?
It's possible. I mean, already in the Israel, in the UK, in the US, in some of the European countries, they're already starting to give boosters 9 months after the first vaccines were given. But I mean, there's differences. In those countries, they had very low seroprevalence. In Israel, before this last wave, only 5% of people had gotten COVID at that time. And so there was a lot of susceptible people. So when the Delta variant came, it infected many people, even those who had gotten the vaccine. Now, remember, in South Africa, we already had the Delta variant, and already probably 80% of South Africans have already gotten COVID-19. So I think each country is a little bit different, and I'm not sure. So, for now, our data is showing that with J&J, the protection is quite long-lasting. They believe already now, 8-9 months later, you're still well protected. But I think it's something that I can't say. Studies are showing that if you had J&J first, you should take a Pfizer booster 6 months or 8 months later. So I think in the next few months, we'll get information from our Vaccine Ministerial Advisory Committee, from SAPRA, from the experts in the South African COVID response that will advise us about whether we need boosters. And then over time, they'll make decisions about how frequently we may need boosters thereafter. But remember that even with childhood vaccines, for instance, with diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, you take the primary vaccines when you're children, and then you get a booster when they're a little bit old, when they're babies, and then they get a booster when they're a few years old. Similar to pneumococcal vaccine, there's 3 doses. So many vaccines need a few doses to work. It's not just 1 dose or 2 doses that will work. So maybe we're just learning about what's the optimum number of doses and how far they must be spaced apart for the vaccine to work.
My last question before we go on to the myths, Doctor, would be wave 4.
Yeah.
Everybody is talking about wave 4, and we've now heard that it could possibly be November, December. Is it a possibility, and how is it possible to predict it?
It's very difficult to predict. And so there's many factors that influence whether we'll have a wave, right? The one is how much seroprevalence is there? How many people have already had natural infection? So even though you have a chance of being reinfected, but you do have some immunity that lasts for some time. And so the first thing is how much seroprevalence do we have? The second thing is how much vaccine coverage do we have? And so if we have high vaccine coverage, we probably will have lower risk of a big wave. The third thing is there a new variant? We can't predict that. If a new variant pops up, at the moment, there's nothing circulating in other countries that's very worrying yet for us. Our Delta wave was big. It affected Gauteng in a big way. If another variant pops up in another country, travels to South Africa, it may then, influence a new wave. And then the last thing also is people's behavior and levels of restriction. I mean, it's been a long time that we've had to deal with lockdowns. We've had businesses closed. We've had restrictions to gatherings, to religious gatherings as well. I mean, people cannot sustain that all, indefinitely. And so when we become more lax and people gather more, that's again a chance of a new wave starting. So it's very difficult to predict. I think people are saying November, December, just because that's what we saw with the first, second, and third wave. That's been the kind of duration in between waves in the past. So based on that, it's possible that we could have another wave come November, December. But again, like I say, it depends on all those other factors. So I'm not sure. I mean, I think what we are starting to talk about at the NICD is not, wave after wave, but, this becomes a new normal where we have resurgences of COVID-19 in some areas where there's still a lot of people who don't have immunity and a lot of susceptible people. I mean, the reality is, I showed you the vaccine coverage is not great in South Africa. I would love over 50s, over 60s to get vaccinated because they're most at risk, and it's only 50% at the moment. So there's still a lot of people who are at risk. And so I think it depends on all of those things, whether we will have a wave or not.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. We can talk about the myths now.
Sure. So one thing I've heard a lot of people say is there a microchip in the vaccine? And I can say quite confidently, there's no microchip. There's no substance that enables governments or corporations to track you. As I showed you earlier, there's only the contents of the vaccine that enable your body to produce antibodies so that you can recognize the virus and attack the virus if you ever encounter it. And so there's definitely nothing in the vaccine that's allowing people to monitor you. Will the vaccine change my DNA? And again, no, there's no technology in the vaccine to do that. The vaccine only has these instructions for your body to fight the virus. So someone mentioned that it's like a wanted poster, this mRNA. It's telling your body, look, this is COVID, right? Now you know what's COVID. Now next time you see COVID, you must attack COVID. So once that vaccine is in your body, and it enters your cells, and it teaches your cell how to make an antibody, the vaccine product just gets excreted from your body. Like medicines. Normally you take a medicine, whatever you need, you use, and the rest gets excreted. So the vaccine product gets excreted very quickly, and it doesn't stay in your body for a long time. It doesn't enter the nucleus of your cell, which is where your DNA lives. And so it has no ability to change your DNA at all. Do the vaccines have dangerous ingredients? Now, I wanted to say a little bit about mRNA. It's actually amazing technology. Scientists have been working on this for about a decade or even longer, and they're looking at it, using it particularly for cancer therapy. Now, I know if myself or any of my loved ones gets cancer, and we know how difficult it is to cure some cancers, I would be all for a new technology. I mean, this mRNA basically has the ability to send a targeted message to a particular cell in your body to make a particular molecule, which is amazing. And so it can send us a message to your to your body to make cells against the cancer. It can send a message to your cells to make antibodies against a virus. And once it's done with its job of making those antibodies or cancer, cells to defeat the cancer, it then leaves your body. So we're going to see more and more of mRNA being used in the future. It's really one of the things that, modern advances in medicine, it's something really that holds a great promise for therapy in the future. So the mRNA just has the messenger molecule, a fatty layer to protect it, and some salts and sugars and things to kind of stabilize the whole vaccine. There's no blood products or fetal cells or anything like that. Some people might say there isn't enough data to show it's safe, and I'll argue that billions of people have been vaccinated, many of them almost a year ago. Clinical trials have been done, many of them to show us the vaccine is safe. Many people were involved in the testing process, including South Africans, and the vaccines had to go through many approval processes, including here by SAHPRA. And it's only once a vaccine gets approved that really, we continue to follow people up to monitor them for side effects. So I think enough people have gotten the vaccine, that we've got enough data now to show that we haven't found any serious worries about sudden death or terrible adverse events that are very common. That's not what we found. Some people are saying, and I've seen this message circulating, that if you take the vaccine, you're going to die in 2 years. Now, I don't know how anybody knows what's going to happen in 2 years. I
I've also
don't
wondered
know.
that.
I mean, I also don't know. So I can't tell you for sure that nothing's going to happen in 2 years. But what I can tell you is we have decades of experience with vaccines, and none of the other vaccines have side effects that happen 2 years later. Whatever side effects you have mostly happen within the first couple of days. By about 6 weeks, you're most likely to have these side effects and nothing after that, because the vaccine products don't go into your cell and change your body cells and become a part of your cell. So I can't imagine anything that's going to happen 2 years from now. It doesn't affect your fertility. It doesn't affect your pregnancy, breastfeeding, or any of those things. So all I can say is that all our experiences with vaccines and with the COVID vaccine thus far, we haven't found any side effects beyond the first 6 weeks. Can I get COVID-19 from the vaccines? No. So while I showed you earlier that the vaccine can either contain like little pieces or proteins of the virus or inactive forms of the virus, they don't contain any live virus. So they can't give you COVID-19. So those symptoms like fever that you may get after you get the vaccine, that's your body, your immune system learning to fight the virus, but it's not COVID-19. But you could still be getting COVID-19 from other people. And so many people during this third wave took the vaccine and then a few days later developed COVID-19 just because they were exposed to others in their homes or communities. So you may ask, why do I need the vaccine if I already had COVID-19?
Yes.
And studies have found that natural immunity after you had COVID-19 isn't as strong and isn't as long lasting, whereas vaccine immunity lasts much longer and is much stronger. And a CDC study found that after infection, unvaccinated people were 2 times more likely to get COVID again, whereas people who are compared to people who were vaccinated. And so you're more likely to get COVID again if you were unvaccinated, had COVID before, then got COVID again, than a person who was vaccinated getting COVID again. Do I still need to take precautions after vaccination? So remember that especially if you're getting the Pfizer vaccine, you need to take both doses 6 weeks apart, and then only 2 weeks after your second shot do you have enough immunity kicked in. So my advice is before that, you need to take precautions, but I think even after that, continue to take precautions, because a vaccine doesn't protect you 100% against COVID-19. And even if you do get it, it might be mild, but you could pass it on to other people. So I think these precautions are going to be with us for a while. I got the vaccine in March and I still use a mask. I still keep distance from people when I'm out. I avoid crowds and poorly ventilated places. I wash hands and sanitize. And so I think that for now, we just have to, until we get very high vaccine coverage or natural immunity, I think we just have to keep using these precautions. And also when we have a wave, people must definitely not have any gatherings. People should stay in their little bubbles at home. And just for those few weeks, just protect each other and not mix. So now my last question, should you take the COVID-19 vaccine? So they did a study here in South Africa, the HSRC and the University of Joburg, to understand people's reasons for being hesitant to take the vaccine. And actually, most people were concerned about the side effects. And then less people were saying, it doesn't work. Less people than that were saying they don't trust the vaccine companies and the government. So those 3 seem to be the biggest reasons why people didn't want to take vaccines in South Africa. And then some of the other reasons where they were just unsure, they need more information, there was rumors and things that they read on social media. So look, not everyone is hardcore against vaccination. Some people have very valid concerns. And I hope I've tried to address some of these concerns here today. But what I wanted to end off with was a few points around why we should vaccinate. So I've shown you that we should vaccinate to protect ourselves, because the vaccine protects you against getting severe disease and dying. Now, even though we know that older people and those with medical conditions are at more risk of severe disease, that doesn't mean that if you're young and healthy, you can't get sick. I know a 30-year-old health fanatic, gym fanatic, who got so sick, was admitted twice, had COVID pneumonia, had clots in his lungs. He's got no medical conditions and he's in his 30s. So even young, healthy people got very sick with COVID. So don't feel like I'm young, let me get COVID, I'll probably be fine. We don't know why some people get very sick and some don't. So the vaccine does protect you as an individual. But remember, we take the vaccine to protect others. There's some people who can't take the vaccination, like our children can't take the vaccine yet. So we can protect them by us taking the vaccine. And we take the vaccine to protect those who can't mount a good immune response. So I showed you that when you take the vaccine, your body learns to make antibodies. But remember, people with HIV, people with autoimmune diseases, they can't mount as good an immune response. And so by us vaccinating, we buffer them, we protect them so that they don't encounter COVID-19, and we protect them as well. And remember that COVID has had a huge impact on our country. It's impacted on health in terms of the deaths and hospitalizations, and in the future, dealing with long COVID, people who may need health services from long COVID. It's impacted on our economy. There's been such a rise in unemployment, so many restrictions, closures of businesses, travel and tourism and other industries have been affected. It's affected us socially. It's affected our education. I mean, our kids in the last year and a half have severely been affected by school closures. And so I think we take vaccines so that we can go back to normal, or some kind of normal, so that we don't have to continue wave after wave of lockdowns and restrictions and school closures and, high numbers of deaths. Can you be forced to take the COVID-19 vaccine? Now, in the South African Constitution, it protects individual rights, but COVID-19 is a notifiable condition, and that gives the health department some leeway in terms of mandating some public behavior. And also, because it was declared, we declared a state of disaster, the disaster regulations allows us to also compel people to vaccinate. But I don't think South Africa will go the route of mandatory vaccines. And what the minister has said is you have the right to not vaccinate, but you don't have the right to endanger other people. And we're seeing in other countries that mandates are coming into play. In California, they're mandating all their teachers and all their healthcare workers to be vaccinated. And in South Africa, Discovery has introduced a mandatory vaccine policy for all their staff. The Western Cape is looking at a mandatory vaccination for all their staff of government and universities as well. So I think in some companies, you will see that they will introduce, mandatory vaccine policies. But besides making it compulsory, I think not having a vaccine will severely restrict our social lives. So, for instance, in New York City, there's what you call a key to New York City, which is a vaccine pass that allows you to go to indoor entertainment like movie theaters, live music, concerts, restaurants, nightclubs, gyms, fitness centers, sporting events. And so, you can't travel on airlines into certain countries without a vaccine. You can't go to soccer matches or sporting events in some countries without a vaccine card. In Indonesia, you can't go into a mall without a vaccine card. So I think you're going to be very constrained more and more if you don't have a vaccine. And then you might ask, what is this vaccine card? Why are they trying to control me? Why must I keep a vaccine card or a digital vaccine certificate? Actually, about 100 years ago, there was a vaccine certificate in the Ottoman Empire for plague. And it was just to protect people because these are highly transmissible infections. And so having a vaccine card meant that you were protected so you could travel between places. So this is not for the first time that they're introducing vaccine cards. Remember, there's also a vaccine card for yellow fever, and you can't go to certain countries if you don't produce your yellow fever vaccine. And so we all have those yellow fever cards when we travel. And even our kids have vaccine cards for going to school when they start school. And so these vaccine cards are not for some sinister reason to control you or to cause stigma for those that are not vaccinated. Really, they're about countries introducing rules to prevent infection coming into their country and spreading. And it's not unheard of because we have the same thing for yellow fever and meningococcal vaccine as well. So finally, some key messages. You can help stop the pandemic by getting a vaccine. The vaccine does prevent against severe disease, especially in the elderly and high risk. Vaccines are safe and effective. They are free and it's easy to walk in to get. You don't need to make appointments to walk in with your ID number, or if you're a foreigner, then with your passport number. Even undocumented people who aren't here legally, anyone can go in and get a vaccine, no questions asked. Remember also, as I said, after the vaccine, you might have some temporary side effects, but these are normal signs that your body is building protection. And also to reinforce that even after you're vaccinated, continue to take precautions, wear masks. I mean, I know it's not ideal, and you may say, well, I took the vaccine, why must I still wear the mask? I think it's just about, being extra safe and extra cautious while COVID is circulating. So I'm happy to share this presentation. There are some resources if you want to learn more. But I wanted to end on one point, right? I have huge sympathy for people who are just confused or like nervous or mistrustful. There is a lot to be mistrustful of. I mean, governments don't always act in the best interest of their citizens. Multinational corporations often do things for profit and not for the good of other people. Rich countries do things to protect themselves and not for poorer countries. So I know there's many reasons to mistrust governments and global leaders and global corporations. But I think we just have to be reasonable. Think about where you're getting your information, trust reputable sources. And I think we can't live a life where everything is a sinister conspiracy theory. There are some real, like I actually wonder about the origins of the virus. Did it come from a lab? Whatever. I don't know. But I'm just saying there are some things that maybe, there are some valid conspiracy theories. Even, governments and WHO are looking into the origins of the virus. But that's not to say that everything is a conspiracy. That's not to say that 5G or, they're putting chips into us and all of these things. I think that we've always trusted our healthcare workers to advise us when we were pregnant, when we had appendicitis, when we had pneumonia, when we had gastros, and so continue to trust them. If your doctors are telling you and your public health officials and I'm telling you that the vaccine is safe and it is effective, then I think, take that advice like you always did trust your doctors. I know faith is a big part of this. I don't know of any faith groups, no Christian or Muslim or Jewish or any other faith groups at the leadership that's saying vaccines are bad. Individuals might have some concerns, but all our faith-based leaders are saying take the vaccine. And finally, just to always, balance up rights and responsibilities. Yes, we have individual rights, but we do have responsibilities to each other and for our country to reach some kind of normality again. Thank you so much for your time. Sorry, I've spoken so much.
Doctor, this has been so insightful. Thank you very, very much for touching and answering all those questions that come through. I'm going to give Paul Bester the opportunity now, from a Saita point of view, to just address our viewers and also just give a stance of Saita and some encouragement for the sector to do the responsible thing and get the vaccine.
Louise, thank you. I'm not sure what I can add. I mean, for once, we are listening to somebody that speaks about the vaccine on a knowledgeable. It's not a Dr. Google or a person that's a clerk at a grocery store who suddenly becomes a virologist of note. It's somebody that actually works in the field, who's given up a time for an hour to tell us. I don't have any questions to her. If I was to be asking a question, I have nothing to say. She covered us from base A to B. But what I wanted to say is I want to go to our people and the people on the street. And I wanted to just touch on 2 or 3 things. One was what she said, the conspiracy theory of where this virus could have, comes from. It's possible, and I've listened to some of the talk of the virus coming from a university in Wuhan, not maybe from eating a bat, but it was that it came out and it was given to some people and accidentally went out. If that is true, that is to me that's a very probable cause. But that's also the reason why the virus is why the vaccine is so quickly and it comes out quickly, because at that university viruses are tested plus vaccines that can keep, if something like this would happen in the world, how to deal with it. So I'm of the opinion that the vaccine that we're having and we're seeing currently on our tables and being injected in our bodies is the correct vaccine. It's working. It's going to deal with that virus, which is COVID, to keep us healthy. The second one that I wanted to touch on, and I hear a lot of people in our environments talk about the government wants to deal with us and they want to kill us, and then this virus, the injection is going to kill us. And I want to just take 2 minutes here to visualize. Let's say the ANC wants to kill its people. Fine. So it puts out the vaccine on the table, and it kills all the ANC supporters who follows the government to take it, and they kill it. Do you think the DA people will vote for the ANC people? No, they will never vote for that same government. That government will be out of the seats in 2 months because all its supporters has been killed, according to the people saying. So no, government wants to keep you alive so that they can take your money and spend it and I mean, that's just something or like off the cuff and tongue in cheek. I'm trying to say is don't worry about governments wanting to kill you. They want to keep you alive. The vaccine works. It's there for our protection. I am one of those guys that can say I'm like a AA meeting to say my name is Paul Bester and I survived COVID because I survived COVID in the hospital. I was in the hospital. I saw the doors of death in the hospital and I came through it and I'm alive and my God brought me through. I don't want to go there again. Never, ever. I don't want to wish that to my worst enemy. To go through a COVID. I was at hospital in the 23rd of August, standing in the window watching my best friend die because of COVID. I saw him breathe his last breath through the hospital window because of COVID. I want to say to people today, COVID is real. It's not a joke. If you're an anti-vaxxer, please take this 1 hour session that we have today. Look at it and then you look at it again. And then you say, if I'm making the sense by saying I don't want to be vaccinated, it just doesn't make sense. It's your right not to be vaccinated or your right to choose how to vaccinate or not. I get that. I get that. But don't listen to fake news or to Dr. Google or to what people on Facebook puts out and say, look at the news. This is the news. And then you see it's a news agency that you've never heard of. And then one last thing, please. One last thing that I want to say is this. When people tell you, I want to do some more investigation or we'll wait and see, what will you do? What investigation possibly can you do more than what the World Health Organization did with more than $800 billion of research? What on earth can you possibly research more on Google than what has already been done and in documents documented by all health organizations? Don't be a fool. Listen to the real doctors. Don't listen to Google doctors. Do what's the best so that South Africa can go back to trading. And now to end off by saying our informal traders who works on the streets, corners and works in markets are dependent on the people walking there. We cannot ill afford a fourth wave. So the only way to stop that is, I know we won't get herd immunity as the doctor said, and I agree with that. But the only way we can get back to normality is if all of us try our utmost best to vaccinate, to keep the COVID virus down so that we can get back to normality so that business trading can proceed and the people that is out on the streets in the cold in the mornings and the nights can put bread on the table. And that's all I want to say. Is I have nothing more to say. The doctor covered us from A to Z. And I want this piece today that we have, I know we put it and we send it off. I want us to send it off as far as possible, comrades. Whoever listens in, forward this to your context. I don't think we've seen a bigger, influential and clear sort of talk about COVID and the vaccine than we had tonight. I want to applaud to the doctor. I want to say thank you, Doc. Shukran for what you did tonight. This is what we needed, and we'll send it to the corners of South Africa. Thank you, Louise.
Thank you very much, Paul. Beautiful last words. Dr. Jasat, thank you. Very insightful. I think I understand a lot better, and what I take from you is your patience and your empathy that you have with people who are feeling unsure. And I appreciate that. But I still think we all have a role to play, and we're going to take that forward as Saita. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
And with that, we come to the end of this evening's broadcast. Till the next time, from me, Louise, good night.